moment and look at the room around you. The walls aren't moving. The light on the far surface holds steady. If you turn your head, the world doesn't lurch or smear. It stays exactly where it was, patient, solid, certain, and that certainty feels like the most basic fact of being alive. And of course, the room is steady. The room is just there. But the steadiness you're experiencing right now is not coming from the room. It's coming from you, and you've never once been told you were doing it. Here is something small that almost everyone has lived through. You're half listening to someone across a noisy cafe, and for a second you mishear a word. They say something ordinary, but your ears deliver something strange, and for a flicker the sentence makes no sense. Then, a half beat later, it clicks into place, and you hear what they actually said, so cleanly that you can barely remember the wrong version. The mistake gets corrected before you fully noticed it was a mistake. Or you walk into a dim bedroom and there's a figure standing by the door. Your chest tightens and then it resolves into a coat on a hook. Not slowly, instantly. The person becomes a coat as if the person had never been there at all. Taking something uncertain, something ambiguous, something incomplete, and resolving it into a single, confident, livable picture. Most of the time, the work is invisible. Every so often, it stutters, and you see the edit happen. Because the truth is that the world reaching your senses is nothing like the smooth, stable scene you experience. The signal is broken. Light enters your eyes in a flood of noise, upside down, and there's even a blind patch off to one side of each eye's view where the optic nerve exits and no light-sensing cells exist at all. Though in normal vision, your other eye usually covers the gap. Your eyes don't glide across this room. They jump in tiny, violent flicks several times a second, and during each jump, the image is smeared into uselessness. Sound arrives delayed and tangled. Your body sways constantly. Your head tilts. Your heart pounds against everything you're trying to look at. By every reasonable measure, the raw feed of your senses is a shaking, fragmented, half-blind mess. And yet none of that reaches you. What reaches you is a calm, seamless, perfectly upright world that holds still when you want it to and moves only when something actually moves. You never see the blind patch in your vision. You never feel the image smear when your eyes jump. The chaos is happening. It's just being handled somewhere behind the scenes by something working very hard so that you never have to know. The stillness of your room is not a property of the room. It's an achievement. It's something being done for you continuously right now while you sit there assuming the world is simply holding itself together. This is the strange thing the most ordinary moment is hiding. We move through our days believing we are looking out a clear window at reality, that our experience is a faithful broadcast of what's actually out there, delivered straight to us untouched. It's the most natural assumption in the world. It's also not quite what's happening. What's happening is closer to a kind of constant, gentle correction. The mind takes the trembling, gap-filled, delayed signal and steadies it, fills what's missing, smooths what's jagged, settles what's uncertain, and hands you the result so quickly and so confidently that you mistake the steadied version for the world itself. And I want to be careful here because there's a cheap and dramatic way to say this, and it's wrong. The cheap version says none of it is real, that you're trapped in an illusion, that reality is fake and your senses are lying to you. That's not it at all. The room is real. The coat is real. The world out there exists, indifferent and solid, whether or not you're looking. The point isn't that reality is an illusion. The point is subtler and I think far more interesting. The point is that the steadiness, the calm, the certainty, the seamless continuity you experience is not something the world is sending you. It's something you are adding. You are not receiving a stable world. You are stabilizing an unstable signal every waking second and calling the result seeing. Think about what that means for a moment, because it sneaks up on you when you feel completely sure of what you just saw, when you'd swear to it. That feeling of certainty isn't a measurement of how clear the information was. The information is never raw certainty. Even clear input still has to be selected, interpreted, and stabilized. The certainty is part of the construction. It's added on top, like a label that says this is solid, you can trust this, stop questioning and get on with living. And mostly that label is helpful. You'd never get through a day if you experience the actual noise. You can't cross a street while consciously doubting whether the car is a car. So the mind doesn't show you the doubt. It shows you the answer, dressed up as certainty, and quietly throws the uncertainty away. Who decided the figure was a coat? Who corrected the misheard word before I noticed? Who is holding the room still while my eyes jerk around in their sockets and my body sways and the light floods in upside down? Something is doing this work. Your brain is making thousands of small inferences every second about what you're seeing and hearing and feeling, and is making them below the level where you could ever catch it in the act. And it's good at its job, so good that you've gone your entire life without suspecting it was working at all. That's the part that stays with me. Not that perception is unreliable. It's actually astonishingly reliable most of the time. What stays with me is the sheer effort hidden underneath the calm. Right now, as you sit in a room that seems to be doing nothing at all, something inside you is performing one of the most demanding tasks imaginable, taking a torrent of broken, contradictory, incomplete data and turning it, instantly and without complaint, into a single coherent world you can simply live in. It asks nothing of you. It takes no credit. It just hands you a steady reality and lets you believe the steadiness was free. So the misheard word, the coat that was a person, the room that refuses to spin, these aren't glitches in the recording. There is no recording. There's a construction happening continuously, and those rare flickers are the only moments you ever get to see it being built. The real mystery isn't why perception occasionally fails. The real mystery is why it almost never does, how something inside you takes a shaking, half-blind signal and turns it into the most convincing thing you know, the thing you'd stake your life on, the thing you call simply the world. And if that's true, then the next question is the one that actually mattered. Not that the mind studies reality, but how. What is it doing? And in that invisible space behind your eyes, to take the chaos and hand you the calm. And what does it have to leave out in order to make a world this convincing hold still? The answer begins with that blind patch because it shows the basic move in its purest form. Where the optic nerve leaves the back of each eye, there are no light-sensing cells, a small region that receives nothing. You don't see a black dot there. You don't see a smudge or a gap. Part of what feels perfectly continuous is being inferred from the surrounding pattern, and in ordinary vision, you cannot feel where that inference begins. If you're looking at a brick wall, the region reads as brick. If you're looking at a face, it reads as face. The system completes the scene using context so seamlessly that the completion is invisible to you. That completion is not a rare trick reserved for one spot. It's the basic move the whole system runs on. Your senses do not deliver a finished picture. They deliver fragments sharp in the center, blurry at the edges, full of gaps, arriving at slightly different speeds, smeared every time your eyes jump. And several times a second your eyes do jump, in fast flicks called saccades, and during each flick the image streaking across your retina is useless. A motion blur you could never read. By rights, your visual world should stutter and lurch dozens of times a minute. Instead, it holds perfectly still. The visual system suppresses much of the blur during each jump and stitches the steady moments together so the seams never show. You get the calm. The chaos is edited out before it ever reaches you. You can catch the same process in your hearing. Think again about the misheard word in the noisy room. The actual sound that reached your ears was incomplete. A syllable swallowed by a passing truck, a consonant lost under someone's laugh. What you heard was your mind taking the broken audio and the shape of the sentence so far and predicting the most likely word, then inserting it so smoothly that you experienced it as having heard it cleanly. Researchers have shown this in careful ways. Cut a single speech sound out of a recorded sentence and replace it with a cough, and listeners will swear they heard the missing sound clearly. The mind didn't just guess the word, it manufactured the experience of having perceived it. The gap was real. Your sense of having heard it whole was the construction, and this is where a single idea ties the whole thing together. The mind does not seem to wait passively for information and then react to it. It appears to run ahead, constantly predicting what's about to arrive, building a model of the world a half step before the senses confirm it, and then using the incoming signal mostly to check and correct that model. Some researchers describe perception less as a camera taking in a scene and more as a continuous, educated guess that reality is invited to revise. You don't experience raw light hitting the eyes so much as you experience the brain's best model of what caused that light, a model constantly corrected by the signal itself. When the prediction matches, you feel nothing unusual, just a stable world. When the prediction is badly wrong, you get that small jolt, the coat that was a person, the step that wasn't there, the face you saw in the wallpaper. That jolt is the moment the guess and the signal disagreed and you felt the model being corrected. This is also why expectation shapes perception so powerfully in ways that can feel almost unfair. If someone tells you a recording contains a certain phrase, you'll suddenly hear that phrase clearly in what was a moment ago meaningless garble. If you're frightened walking home alone, your mind leans its predictions toward threat, and the shadows oblige a swaying branch becomes a figure. A creak becomes a footstep. You're not being foolish. The system is doing exactly what it always does, filling ambiguity with its best expectation. It's just that fear has changed which expectations it reaches for first. What you see is always a blend of what's out there and what you brought with you. If you've ever had a moment where reality seemed to glitch, or you'd have sworn you saw something that wasn't there or missed something obvious sitting right in front of you, I want you to hear this clearly. That was not your mind malfunctioning. That was your mind doing the ordinary thing it always does. Only this time you've caught it. The strange experiences and the seamless ones come from the very same process. Most of the time, the construction is so accurate you never notice it's a construction. Once in a while, the guess overshoots, and for a heartbeat, you glimpse the editing room behind your eyes. Nothing was broken. You simply saw for a second how the whole thing is made. And here is the nuance I don't want to lose, because it's the difference between this being a true idea and a reckless one. Constructed does not mean fabricated. The fact that your mind builds your experience does not mean it's making things up, and it absolutely does not mean reality is an illusion or that you can't trust your senses at all. The model your mind builds is tied tightly and constantly to the actual world. It's tested against the incoming light and sound thousands of times a second and corrected whenever it drifts. That's exactly why it's so reliable. When you reach for the cup, your hand lands on the cup. When you step off the curb, the ground is there. The construction works because it's anchored a guess on a very short leash, yanked back into line by reality the instant it strays. So this is not a story about being deceived. It's a story about how astonishingly good your mind is at turning fragments into something you can stake your life on and usually be right. I also want to be honest about the edges of what anyone can claim here, because this is a place where confident-sounding voices tend to overreach. Scientists can describe the gap filling, the saccades, the blind spot, the prediction, the way expectation bends perception. These are well studied and not in serious doubt. But the deeper question of how any of this becomes a felt experience at all, why there is something it is like to see red rather than just information or being processed in the dark, remains genuinely unsolved. The models are still developing. Different researchers describe the mechanism in different language, and reasonable people disagree about the detail. So take the strong version of all this gently. The safe, sturdy claim is that perception is actively constructed and predictive rather than a passive recording, that this is usually accurate, and that consciousness itself is still in large part a mystery we're describing more than explaining. But even the sturdy version is enough to unsettle something you've leaned on your whole life. Because if what you see is partly a prediction your mind is making, if certainty is a label added on top rather than a measure of how clear the signal was, then that confident feeling of, I know what I saw, starts to look very different. It's not a window onto truth. It's the felt texture of a model that hasn't been contradicted yet. And once you understand that, you can't help but turn it outward. Because if your steady, certain world is something your mind is building from expectation and fragment, then so is everyone else's, each person quietly stabilizing their own version through their own fears, memories, and guesses. Which means that when two honest people stand in the same room and walk away certain they saw different things, neither one has to be lying. They may simply be living inside two carefully built interpretations of a moment where the available evidence left real room for different reconstructions. And that changes how you hold your own certainty and how you stand beside someone whose world refuses to match your own. So what do you actually do with this, the knowledge that the steady, certain world you're living in is something you've been quietly building all along? Not distrust it, not spend your days doubting whether the floor is really there. That way lies a kind of paralysis, and it misreads the whole point. Because the construction is reliable, that's the miracle of it. The shift is smaller and stranger than distrust. It's a loosening. It's holding your certainty the way you'd hold something alive, gently, with respect, but without the grip of someone who thinks they're clutching the absolute truth. When you next catch yourself saying, I know exactly what I saw, you might quietly add underneath it, or my mind steadied it into that, and it's usually right, and it might not be this time. You don't have to say it out loud. You just have to leave a little air around your own certainty. That air is where wisdom lives, because the certainty was never a measurement. We treated it that way our whole lives, as if How sure we felt told us how true something was. But certainty is a feature the mind adds on top of a guess to make the guess livable. It's the label that says, stop checking it. This one's solid. And most of the time, that label is doing you a favor. But the strength of the feeling and the accuracy of the perception are two different things that happen to arrive wearing the same clothes. The most useful thing you can carry out of all this is the ability to tell them apart, to notice when the loudness of your conviction is doing work that the actual evidence hasn't earned. And this lands hardest and most usefully in the space between people. Think about how many arguments are really two people each insisting on the reality their own mind handed them. You remember the conversation one way, they remember it another, and both of you are certain. And the certainty makes it feel like one of you must be lying or losing your mind. But by now you can see the gentler, harder truth. You weren't recording the same event and disagreeing about the playback. You were each building it through different attention, different fears, different memories, reaching for different guesses, and reality in those moments left real room for more than one reconstruction. Neither of you is necessarily dishonest. You're standing in two interpretations that almost but never quite overlap. But it hands you something better than the exhausting choice between I'm right and I must be losing my mind. It hands you curiosity. When someone you trust remembers a shared moment in a way that contradicts your certain memory, you can lean in instead of bracing for war, genuinely wondering what their mind built that yours didn't, and what yours filled in that theirs left blank. It's a gentler, more spacious way to stand next to another person, and it tends to make you someone others can actually talk to. But the part that stays with me longest isn't about arguments or accuracy at all. It's about a single ordinary moment and how completely it changes once you understand what's underneath it. Look up for a second and let your eyes rest on whatever's in front of you, a wall, a window, the corner of a table. Notice how still it is, how effortless, how utterly unremarkable. At the start of all this, that stillness was the most boring fact you knew. Now you know what it's made of. Beneath that calm, something inside you is taking a flood of broken, jumping, half-blind signal and steadying it into a place you can simply rest your gaze. The room is real. The steadiness of it, that's the work you're doing. That's what turns the discovery from unsettling to almost moving. The cheap version of this idea wants to hollow you out. None of it is real. Trust nothing. The world's a lie. But that was never where any of this pointed. The world is real. Your mind isn't fooling you, it's translating for you, doing the staggering work of turning raw chaos into something a creature like you can live inside. And the honest response to that isn't dread, it's a kind of startled tenderness. The recognition that the plainest experience you have, stable world in front of open eyes, is one of the most remarkable things occurring anywhere, and it's occurring inside you, unasked, right now. There's intimacy in it too, once the vertigo settles. You are not a spectator pressed against the glass, watching a reality you can never touch. You are part of how it comes to be. What you experience is a meeting between the light and sound the world offers and everything you carry to greet it, your history, your attention, your expectations, your care. No one else assembles quite the world you do because no one else holds the same materials. That used to sound like loneliness, like proof we're each sealed inside a private dream. But it's closer to the opposite. It means your life is genuinely yours, not a generic feed piped into a passive receiver, but a world you help compose with every glance. The light through the window this evening is not the light anyone else receives. It's the one your mind made from what reality offered and what you brought to meet it. You'll forget all of this naturally. By tomorrow, the world will go back to seeming simply, flatly, obviously there, the way it always has. The construction is far too good to keep noticing, and it quietly erases its own fingerprints. But every so often, when you mishear a word and feel it click into place, or a coat in a dark room becomes a stranger and then a coat again, or you turn your head and the room holds impossibly still, you might catch the smallest flicker of the machinery at work. And instead of dismissing it as a glitch, you'll know it for what it is. A rare, accidental glimpse of the thing that has been holding your entire world together from the inside, this whole time, without ever asking to be seen. So here, in the end, is the quiet truth of it. You don't simply see reality, you meet it halfway, you steady what you find, and you live inside the calm you make of it. That isn't a smaller life than the one you imagined you had. It's a stranger and far more astonishing one. The world out there is real, but the steady, seamless, certain world you actually inhabit, The only one you've ever known, you've been building all along. So the next time you walk into a room and it simply holds still for you, pause for a single breath and notice the quietest wonder you own. The room is physically there, and it always was, but the steady, seamless world you actually experience that you are holding together. And it has been waiting your whole life for you to notice who is doing the work.